James Mitchell stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office on the 42nd floor, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Manhattan. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter's nanny confirming that Emma had finished her homework and was asking when Daddy would be home. 7 years old and already understanding that her father's demanding job at Sinclair Technologies often kept him late, Emma had developed a patience beyond her years. James typed a quick reply promising to be home for bedtime stories, then turned back to the financial report spread across his mahogany desk. The knock on his door came at exactly 6:15, precisely when Catherine Sinclair made her evening rounds through the executive floor. James had learned to expect her visits, though he never quite knew what to anticipate. Catherine was nothing like the corporate leaders he had worked under at previous companies. At 43, she had built Sinclair Technologies from a small startup into a billion-dollar empire, yet she still took time to check in personally with her department heads. She wore her authority with an elegant confidence that James found both intimidating and magnetic. "Working late again, James?" Catherine leaned against the doorframe, her tailored navy suit somehow looking effortlessly casual despite its obvious designer pedigree. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, and without her usual corporate armor of perfect makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "You know, all work and no play makes for a very dull life." James offered a tired smile. "Says the woman who probably hasn't left the building before 8 in the past month. I've seen your car in the garage when I arrive at 7. Touché." Catherine walked into his office, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. She settled into the leather chair across from his desk, crossing her legs and regarding him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "But I don't have a beautiful daughter waiting for me at home. Emma should see more of her father." The mention of his daughter made James's chest tighten with the familiar guilt that accompanied his balancing act between career and parenthood. "I'm doing my best. This promotion you gave me last month comes with responsibilities. Responsibilities I know you can handle, which is precisely why I promoted you." Catherine paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "James, can I ask you something personal?" He set down his pen, giving her his full attention. In the 3 years he had worked at Sinclair Technologies, Catherine had maintained professional boundaries despite the undeniable chemistry that occasionally sparked between them during late meetings and strategy sessions. "Of course. Is your bed big enough for 2? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made James's heart race. He studied her face, looking for signs of a joke or test, but found only genuine curiosity mixed with something that looked like longing. Catherine Sinclair, the untouchable CEO who had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune, was asking him about his bed. James knew the smart answer, the safe answer. He could laugh it off, redirect the conversation, maintain the professional distance that protected his career and his daughter's future security. But something in Catherine's eyes, a vulnerability he had never seen before, made him choose honesty instead. "Only if you're the one beside me." Catherine's breath caught audibly. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "I have something important to tell you. Meet me at Central Park tomorrow, by the Bethesda fountain at noon. Please come alone." Before James could respond, she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the weight of unanswered questions. He sat in his office for another hour, unable to focus on work, replaying the conversation and wondering what Catherine wanted to tell him. The attraction between them had been building for months, but James had convinced himself it was impossible. She was his boss, a billionaire who moved in circles far beyond his reach. He was a single father who counted every dollar to make sure Emma had everything she needed. That night, after reading Emma 3 chapters of her favorite book about a brave princess who saved herself, James lay in his king-sized bed, alone as he had been since Emma came into his life. He had adopted her when she was just 6 months old through a private agency, a decision made during a time when he and his ex-wife were still trying to save their marriage. The adoption had been finalized 3 months before his wife left, declaring that she wasn't ready for motherhood. Emma had been James's anchor ever since, the reason he worked so hard, the reason he got up every morning. Saturday morning arrived with spring sunshine and unseasonably warm temperatures. James dressed carefully, trying not to overthink his outfit choice for what might be a personal meeting or might be business-related. He arranged for Emma's nanny to take her to the Central Park Zoo, giving him the freedom to meet Catherine without explaining complicated adult situations to his daughter. He arrived at Bethesda Fountain 15 minutes early, watching tourists take photos and street performers entertain small crowds. Noon came and went. By 12:30, James was checking his phone compulsively, but Catherine hadn't called or texted. He waited another hour, growing increasingly worried. Catherine was many things, but she was never late and never unreliable. By 2 in the afternoon, James's concern had transformed into genuine fear. He called her personal cell and was sent straight to voicemail. He tried her assistant, who hadn't heard from her since Friday evening. Fighting the urge to file a missing person report, James went home to Emma, trying to hide his anxiety behind a cheerful facade as they made dinner together. Sunday morning shattered his world. The news alert on his phone appeared at 7 a.m. while he was making Emma's favorite blueberry pancakes. Catherine Sinclair, tech CEO, found unconscious in apartment. Rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital. James's hands shook as he read the article, learning that Catherine had collapsed Friday night from what doctors suspected was a severe cardiac episode. She was in critical condition. He arranged for emergency childcare and drove to the hospital, using his position at the company to gain access to information. The doctor's words blurred together as he heard phrases like, congenital heart defect, and never diagnosed, and next 48 hours critical. James sat in the waiting room, replaying their last conversation, wondering what Catherine had wanted to tell him. Catherine's lawyer arrived on Sunday evening, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Reynolds who carried a leather briefcase and an air of grim determination. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to speak with you privately." Catherine left specific instructions in the event of a medical emergency. They found an empty consultation room, and Patricia withdrew a sealed envelope from her briefcase. Catherine updated her will and medical directives 2 weeks ago. "You're listed as one of the beneficiaries, and there are documents she wanted you to receive immediately if she became incapacitated." James's hands trembled as he opened the envelope, extracting several pages of Catherine's distinctive handwriting. The letter began simply, "Dear James, if you're reading this, something has happened to prevent me from telling you the truth in person. I need you to know that 7 years ago, I gave birth to a daughter." The room seemed to tilt. James continued reading, his vision blurring as the words sank in. Catherine described being 18, pregnant, pressured by her wealthy family to give the baby up through a private adoption agency. She had spent years building her company, amassing resources, and then hired investigators to find her daughter. 3 months ago, her search had ended. The adoption was handled by Riverside Adoption Services in March, 7 years ago. The baby girl was placed with a young couple who were unable to have biological children. "James, I know you adopted a daughter through that agency at that exact time. I need you to check Emma's birth certificate and adoption papers." James couldn't breathe. His mind raced back to the adoption process, remembering the sealed records, the agency's assurance that the birth mother wanted no contact. He had never questioned it, grateful just to have Emma in his life. The letter continued, "I had Emma's records accessed through legal channels. James, she's my daughter. Our paths crossing at Sinclair Technologies wasn't coincidence. Once I knew you had adopted her, I had to meet you, to see what kind of man was raising my child. What I found was someone extraordinary. I fell in love with both of you, but I didn't know how to tell you without destroying everything." Patricia handed him a folder containing genetic test results, adoption records, and legal documentation. Everything confirmed what the letter claimed. Catherine Sinclair was Emma's biological mother. "There's more," Patricia said softly. "Catherine's will has been updated. If she survives this, she wants to discuss shared custody. If she doesn't, she's leaving the majority of her estate in trust for Emma, with you as trustee and guardian. She's also naming you as her successor at Sinclair Technologies." James sat in stunned silence, processing information that rewrote his entire understanding of the past 3 years. Every kind gesture Catherine had made toward Emma during company family events, every time she had asked about his daughter's well-being, every late-night conversation about parenting challenges had been a mother trying to know her child from a distance. "Can I see her?" James asked finally. Patricia nodded. "You're on her approved visitor list. But James, you should know that her prognosis isn't good. The doctors are considering experimental treatment options, but her heart is severely damaged." Walking into Catherine's hospital room felt like entering another dimension. The powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals lay small and pale against white sheets, connected to machines that beeped steadily. James pulled a chair close to her bed and took her hand, careful of the 4 lines. "I got your letter," he whispered. "I understand now. Catherine, Emma is an amazing little girl, and you should be so proud. She has your determination, your intelligence, your kind heart. I wish you had told me sooner. I would have understood." Catherine's eyes fluttered but didn't open. James sat with her through the night, holding her hand and talking about Emma, sharing stories of their daughter's first steps, first words, first day of school. He described Emma's love of science experiments and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. He talked until his voice grew hoarse, willing Catherine to hear him, to fight, to survive. As dawn broke over Manhattan, casting golden light through the hospital window, James made a decision. Regardless of what happened to Catherine, Emma deserved to know the truth about her origins. But more than that, she deserved the chance to know the remarkable woman who had given her life twice, once through birth and once through the sacrifice of letting her go to a better home. Catherine opened her eyes on the 5th day. James was there, as he had been every morning before work and every evening after putting Emma to bed. The doctors had performed emergency surgery to repair her damaged heart valve, and while the prognosis remained guarded, she had survived the critical period. When her gaze finally focused on James sitting beside her bed, tears slipped down her pale cheeks. "You know," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the beeping monitors. James squeezed her hand gently. "I know everything. And Catherine, I'm not angry. I understand why you did what you did, both then and now." "Emma." Catherine's voice broke on her daughter's name. "Is she okay? Does she know?" "She's fine. She doesn't know yet. I wanted to wait until you were stronger, until we could decide together how to tell her." James leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from Catherine's forehead. "But Catherine, there's something I need to tell you too. Something I discovered while going through Emma's adoption papers more carefully." He pulled out documents from his briefcase, papers he had spent the past 3 days analyzing with growing disbelief. The couple who originally adopted Emma, the ones listed on the initial placement documents, they were my sister Rebecca and her husband Thomas. They died in a car accident when Emma was 6 months old. I adopted her as her uncle, her closest living relative. Catherine, I'm Emma's uncle by blood. My sister was unable to have children, so she and Thomas used the same adoption agency you placed your daughter through. Catherine's eyes widened with shock. "You're her uncle? Then we're not just connected through adoption, we're actually family?" "By the strangest twist of fate, yes. Emma has both her birth mother and her blood uncle raising her. She's been surrounded by biological family without any of us knowing it." James shook his head in wonder. "My sister named her Emma after our grandmother. The same name you had chosen in your heart." A weak laugh escaped Catherine's lips, followed by a wince of pain. "The universe has a strange sense of humor. James, I need to tell you why I waited so long to reach out. Why I didn't tell you immediately when I realized who you were." Over the next hour, as nurses came and went checking vitals and adjusting medications, Catherine told her story. She had been a scholarship student at Columbia University when she became pregnant by a fellow student who disappeared the moment she told him the news. Her parents, old-money Manhattan elites who valued reputation above all else, had given her an ultimatum: give up the baby and continue her education with their financial support, or keep the child and be disowned completely. I was 18 and terrified. I had no job, no resources, no support system beyond my parents. I convinced myself that my daughter would have a better life with parents who were ready for her, who could give her stability. Catherine's voice trembled with old pain. But I never stopped thinking about her. Every birthday, every milestone, I wondered where she was, what she looked like, if she was happy. She had poured her grief and determination into building Sinclair Technologies, working 18-hour days, taking risks that sometimes bordered on reckless. By the time she was 30, she was a millionaire. By 35, a billionaire. And once she had the resources, she hired the best private investigators money could buy to find her daughter. The adoption agency had strict confidentiality policies, but money and persistence eventually opened doors. 6 months ago, I learned that my daughter had been placed with Rebecca and Thomas Mitchell, and that after their deaths, she had been adopted by James Mitchell. I researched you extensively before arranging for Sinclair Technologies to offer you the position you now hold. James absorbed this revelation quietly. So my hiring wasn't based on merit? It was absolutely based on merit, Catherine insisted, her voice gaining strength. I reviewed hundreds of applications before I ever saw your name. You were the best candidate regardless of your connection to Emma. But when I saw your resume, saw your background and qualifications and realized you were raising my daughter, I knew I had to meet you. I had to see what kind of man you were. And what did you find? Catherine's eyes softened. I found a devoted father who prioritized his daughter above everything else. I found a brilliant professional who treated everyone with respect regardless of their position. I found a man who worked harder than anyone else but never forgot to attend Emma's school plays and parent-teacher conferences. I found someone I could trust with my daughter's happiness. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. Before James could respond, the door opened and Catherine's sister Diana entered, accompanied by Patricia Reynolds and 2 men in expensive suits who James recognized as members of Sinclair Technologies' board of directors. The mood in the room shifted immediately from intimate to businesslike. "Catherine, thank God you're awake," Diana said, rushing to her sister's bedside. The 2 women had been estranged for nearly a decade, a casualty of family politics and Catherine's parents' controlling behavior. "I came as soon as Patricia contacted me." The board members, Harrison Webb and Theodore Larson, hung back awkwardly before Harrison cleared his throat. "Ms. Sinclair, we're relieved to see you recovering. However, there are urgent matters that require your attention. The board has been in emergency sessions discussing the company's leadership during your incapacitation." Catherine's expression hardened despite her weakened state. "Let me guess. You want to install an interim CEO and are considering making it permanent. Given your health crisis and the uncertainty of your recovery timeline, we believe it's in the company's best interest to have stable leadership," Theodore said carefully. "We've been reviewing candidates, and while Mr. Mitchell here has done an admirable job as marketing director, we feel the CEO position requires someone with more extensive executive experience. James is named in my succession plan," Catherine stated firmly. "He becomes CEO in the event of my death or permanent incapacitation." "Yes, we're aware of that rather unusual arrangement," Harrison replied, exchanging a glance with Theodore. "But Catherine, with all due respect, we question whether personal feelings influenced that decision. Mr. Mitchell has only been with the company for 3 years." James felt his face flush with anger, but Catherine spoke before he could defend himself. "My personal feelings led me to choose the best person for the job. James understands Sinclair Technologies' mission and values better than any external candidate you might bring in. He's earned the respect of every department he's worked with. And he has a stake in this company's future that goes beyond profit margins." "What stake would that be?" Theodore asked skeptically. Catherine looked at James, silently asking permission. He nodded slightly, understanding that the truth would eventually come out anyway. James is raising my biological daughter. Emma Mitchell is my child, placed for adoption 7 years ago. The succession plan ensures that her future is protected through the company I built for her. The room fell silent. Diana gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. The board members stared in shock. Patricia remained impassive, having known the truth all along. This changes things, Harrison said slowly. The board will need time to process this information and review the legal implications. There are no legal implications, Patricia interjected smoothly. Catherine's succession plan is ironclad. It was drafted by the best corporate attorneys in New York and reviewed by independent counsel. James Mitchell becomes CEO if Catherine is unable to fulfill her duties, with full authority and compensation. Furthermore, 51% of Catherine's shares will be held in trust for Emma Mitchell until she turns 25, at which point she becomes majority shareholder. These provisions cannot be altered without Catherine's explicit consent. Over the following weeks, as Catherine slowly recovered, James found himself navigating the complicated waters of running a billion-dollar company while the board watched his every move with skepticism. Some executives welcomed his leadership, having worked with him long enough to respect his capabilities. Others questioned every decision, waiting for him to fail. The media had gotten wind of Catherine's health crisis, and speculation ran rampant about Sinclair Technology's future. Stock prices fluctuated wildly. Competitors circled like sharks sensing blood in the water. James worked 18-hour days, trying to maintain stability while dealing with his own emotional turmoil about Catherine's revelations and Emma's future. Emma herself remained blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding. She knew that Daddy's boss Ms. Catherine was sick and in the hospital, and she made get-well cards with crayon drawings of flowers and rainbows. James had begun preparing her gently for bigger revelations, talking about different types of families and how love could take many forms. One evening, after tucking Emma into bed, James returned to the hospital to find Catherine sitting up, looking stronger than she had in weeks. Diana had just left, and they were alone for the first time since Catherine's confession. "The doctors say I can go home next week," Catherine said, gesturing for James to sit beside her on the bed. "They're setting me up with medications and a cardiac monitoring device, but I'm going to survive this." "Thank God," James breathed, realizing how much he had feared losing her. "James, we need to talk about what happens next. With us, with Emma, with everything." Catherine took his hand, her grip stronger now. "I meant what I said before my surgery. I've fallen in love with you. But I don't want to complicate Emma's life or pressure you into anything because of our daughter. Catherine, I've been falling in love with you for months, probably since that first strategy meeting where you argued with me for 45 minutes about marketing demographics. I was just too afraid to admit it because you're my boss and I didn't want to risk my job or create gossip that might affect Emma." James lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "But life is too short and too unpredictable to hide from the truth. I love you. Not because you're Emma's birth mother, but because you're brilliant and passionate and you make me want to be better." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "So where does that leave us?" "It leaves us taking things slowly and putting Emma first. She needs to know the truth about her birth mother, and she needs time to process that information. She's only 7, Catherine. This is going to be confusing and possibly scary for her." James paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I think, if we're patient and honest, we can build something real. Not just for Emma's sake, but for ourselves too." They were interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices filtered through the door, and then Patricia burst into the room looking flustered, followed by an elderly couple James didn't recognize. The woman was tall and elegant despite her age, with silver hair styled immaculately. The man was distinguished, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of barely controlled emotion. "I tried to stop them," Patricia said apologetically. "Hello, Catherine," the woman said, her voice cool but with an underlying tremor. "It's been a long time." Catherine's face went pale. "Mother. Father. What are you doing here?" These were the parents who had forced Catherine to give up Emma, James realized. The grandparents who had chosen reputation over their daughter's happiness. He stood protectively closer to Catherine's bed. "We read about your health crisis in the papers," Catherine's father, Harold Sinclair, said stiffly. "Regardless of our past disagreements, you're still our daughter." "Past disagreements?" Catherine's voice rose sharply. "You disowned me when I wouldn't have an abortion. You forced me to give up my baby and then cut me out of your lives when I refused to pretend it never happened." "We thought we were protecting you," Evelyn Sinclair said, her composure cracking. "You were so young, with such a bright future ahead. We didn't want you to throw it all away. You didn't give me a choice." Catherine was sitting fully upright now, ignoring the monitor alarms her elevated heart rate triggered. "You threatened to leave me with nothing if I kept her. I was 18 and terrified, and you used that against me." James placed a calming hand on Catherine's shoulder while Patricia moved to adjust the monitor settings. Harold and Evelyn stood frozen, looking older and frilier than they probably wanted to appear. "We made mistakes," Harold admitted, his voice heavy. "Terrible mistakes that cost us our relationship with our only child. Catherine, we're not here to ask for forgiveness. We're here because you nearly died, and we realize that we've wasted years on pride and stubbornness. We want to make amends," Evelyn added softly. "If you'll allow us to try." Catherine looked at James, seeking guidance. He squeezed her shoulder supportively but knew this decision had to be hers alone. After a long moment, Catherine spoke, her voice steadier. "I appreciate you coming, but I'm not ready to welcome you back into my life with open arms. Too much has happened, too much time has passed. However, I won't turn you away completely. If you want to rebuild a relationship, it will take time and effort and genuine change." "We understand," Harold said, nodding slowly. "And there's something else you should know." Catherine straightened her shoulders, drawing strength from James's presence beside her. "I found her. I found the daughter you made me give away. She's 7 years old, healthy, happy, and brilliant. Her name is Emma, and she's the best thing that ever came from the worst time of my life." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Our granddaughter?" "Yes. And if you want any chance of being part of our lives, you'll need to accept that Emma and her father James are my family now. You don't get to control this narrative or set conditions. Either you accept us all, or you walk away again." The Sinclairs left shortly after, promising to think about Catherine's terms and reach out when they were ready to proceed on her conditions. Diana returned as they departed, having waited outside until the confrontation ended. "That was brave," Diana told her sister, embracing her carefully. "Mom and Dad needed to hear that. They've been living in their own bubble of denial for too long." "I don't know if they'll actually change," Catherine admitted. "But I had to set boundaries. For Emma's sake and my own." 3 months after Catherine's heart surgery, life had settled into a new rhythm. Catherine was back at work part-time, gradually resuming her duties as CEO while James continued handling day-to-day operations. The board had reluctantly accepted the arrangement after seeing how effectively they worked together, and stock prices had stabilized as investor confidence returned. The hardest part had been telling Emma the truth. They had done it together, sitting in Catherine's penthouse apartment with a child psychologist present for support. Emma had listened solemnly as they explained that Catherine was her birth mother, that she had made a difficult choice when Emma was a baby because she wanted Emma to have the best possible life. "So you're like my other mommy?" Emma had asked Catherine, her small face scrunched in concentration as she processed the information. "I'm your birth mother," Catherine had explained gently. "But your real mommy, the one who loved you first after you were born, was your Uncle James's sister. She picked you specially and loved you so much. I'm just someone else who loves you and wants to be part of your life, if that's okay with you." Emma had thought about this for a long moment before asking the question that broke both adults' hearts. "Why didn't you keep me?" Catherine had cried then, unable to hide her emotions. "Because I was very young and scared, and I didn't have the things you needed. I wanted you to have a family who was ready to love you and take care of you the way you deserved. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you and hoped you were happy." Emma had processed this with the remarkable resilience of children. She had more questions over the following weeks, some practical and some philosophical, but she adapted to the new reality with grace. She started calling Catherine by her first name, not quite ready for Mom, but clearly forming a bond with the woman who came to her school plays and brought her special gifts and seemed to understand her in ways that felt natural and right. James and Catherine had moved slowly with their romantic relationship, mindful of not overwhelming Emma or creating office gossip that might undermine their professional credibility. But there were stolen moments, private dinners after Emma was asleep, quiet conversations that stretched into the early morning hours, gentle kisses that promised more when the time was right. 6 months after Catherine's surgery, Sinclair Technologies launched the Sinclair Family Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting adoption services, family reunification programs, and resources for single parents. The foundation's mission statement was clear: to ensure that no parent had to choose between keeping their child and providing for their future, and to help families torn apart by circumstance find their way back together. The foundation's launch gala was held in a Manhattan ballroom decorated with photos and stories from families they had already helped. Emma, now 8 years old and growing more confident every day, stood beside James and Catherine as they addressed the crowd of donors, media representatives, and community leaders. "This foundation exists because of a little girl who deserved better than the choices available to her birth mother," Catherine said, her hand finding Emma's. "It exists because family comes in many forms, and love is what makes a family real. My daughter was raised by her uncle, who became her father in every way that matters. She was loved by people she never got to meet, and she brought together people who didn't know they were searching for each other." Emma's story shows us that family is not just about biology. It's about commitment, sacrifice, and choosing to show up every single day. James took over, his voice strong and steady. "The Sinclair Family Foundation will provide financial support for parents facing difficult choices, counseling services for birth parents dealing with the grief of adoption, and resources to help adoptive families navigate the complex emotions involved in raising children who come from loss. We'll also work to reunify families when circumstances change and it's in the child's best interest." The gala raised $3 million in its first night, exceeding their wildest projections. But more important than the money were the stories shared by attendees, the connections made, the hope kindled in hearts that had been broken by separation or loss. One of the evening's most emotional moments came when Diana approached the stage with an elderly couple in tow. Harold and Evelyn Sinclair had spent the past 6 months in intensive family therapy, working through decades of dysfunction and control issues. They had written letters to Catherine, which she had read but not responded to immediately. They had made donations to causes supporting young mothers. They had, in short, been trying to prove their commitment to change. "Catherine, Emma, James," Diana said, her voice carrying through the microphone. "I'd like to introduce you to 2 people who have been on their own journey of growth and healing. Mom and Dad have something they'd like to say." Evelyn stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly together. "Emma, sweetheart, we're your grandparents. We made terrible mistakes when your mother was young, mistakes that hurt her deeply and kept us from knowing you for the first 8 years of your life. We can't change the past, but we hope you'll give us the chance to be part of your future." Harold cleared his throat, emotion evident in his gruff voice. "Catherine, you've built something remarkable here. Not just the company, though that's impressive enough. You've built a family based on honesty and second chances and real love. We'd like to be part of that family, if you'll have us. No conditions, no control, just grandparents who want to know their granddaughter and support their daughter." Catherine looked at James, who nodded encouragingly, then down at Emma, who was watching her grandparents with curious eyes. "Emma, what do you think? Should we give Grandma and Grandpa Sinclair a chance?" Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important decisions. "Do they know how to play chess?" "Uncle James has been teaching me, but I need more people to practice with." Harold laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to release years of tension. "I happen to be an excellent chess player. I'd be honored to teach you some advanced strategies." "Okay then," Emma decided. "They can be my grandparents. But they have to come to my birthday party next month." "We'll be there," Evelyn promised, tears streaming down her face. "We wouldn't miss it for the world." The acceptance was tentative and would require continued work from all parties, but it was a beginning. As the gala wound down and guests departed with gift bags containing information about the Foundation's programs, James found Catherine standing alone on the ballroom balcony, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "Quite a night," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Catherine leaned back against his chest, sighing contentedly. "I keep thinking about what you said to me that day in your office. Only if you're the one beside me." "Did you mean it, even then?" "I meant it." James turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I had been falling for you for months, but I was terrified of what it would mean for my career, for Emma's stability, for everything. And then you asked that question, and I couldn't lie. I almost didn't ask. I had rehearsed a dozen different ways to tell you about Emma, but when I stood in your office that evening, looking at you working so hard to provide for my daughter, I just blurted out the first thing that came to mind." Catherine smiled at the memory. "I was trying to flirt and confess and figure out if you felt the same way I did, all at once. It worked." James kissed her softly, a promise and a question. "Catherine Sinclair, would you consider making an honest man out of me?" "Not right away, not until Emma is ready and we've built the foundation we all need. But someday, when the time is right, would you marry me?" Catherine's eyes widened. "James Mitchell, are you proposing to me on a balcony overlooking Manhattan after the most emotionally exhausting day of my life? I'm asking if you'd consider it. Eventually. When we're ready." He grinned, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. "I don't have a ring yet, and this isn't the grand gesture you deserve, but I needed you to know that this is real for me. You're not just Emma's mother or my boss or a convenient solution to a complicated situation. You're the woman I want to spend my life with." "Yes," Catherine said simply. "Not now, but someday, absolutely yes." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. Inside the ballroom, Emma was teaching Diana and some of the younger Foundation staff a complicated hand-clapping game she had learned at school. The sound of laughter drifted out to the balcony, a reminder of the family they were building together. 2 years later, the Sinclair Family Foundation had expanded to 12 cities across the United States, helping thousands of families navigate adoption, providing financial support for parents in crisis, and reunifying families when circumstances allowed. Catherine's health remained stable, thanks to careful monitoring and lifestyle changes. Emma had adjusted beautifully to having both her uncle father and birth mother actively involved in her life, and she had developed a sweet relationship with her grandparents, who doted on her with the enthusiasm of people making up for lost time. The wedding took place in Central Park, not far from the Bethesda fountain where Catherine had planned to reveal her secret 2 years earlier. Emma served as flower girl, wearing a lavender dress she had helped design and carrying a bouquet of white roses. Diana was Catherine's maid of honor, while Catherine's childhood friend Michael stood up for James. Harold and Evelyn Sinclair sat in the front row, holding hands and crying happy tears. As James and Catherine exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love and support each other through whatever challenges life might bring, Emma stood between them, holding both their hands. It wasn't traditional, but nothing about their family had been traditional from the start. "I promise to be a partner in all things," James said, his voice steady despite his emotion. To share in the joys and burdens of running both a company and a family. To love you through health scares and board meetings, through Emma's teenage years and whatever adventures come next. You asked me once if my bed was big enough for two, and I told you it was only if you were the one beside me. That's still true, Catherine. You're the only one I want beside me, today and always. Catherine's voice trembled as she spoke her vows. James, you gave my daughter the life I couldn't provide, and then you gave me the gift of knowing her. You've shown me what it means to love without conditions, to lead with compassion, to build something meaningful that goes beyond profit margins and corporate success. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your friend, and your love. I promise to honor the family we've created together and to keep building it stronger every day. The judge officiating the ceremony smiled warmly. Emma, I understand you have something you'd like to say. Emma nodded seriously, looking between James and Catherine. I promise to be a good daughter to both of you, even when I'm being difficult, which Aunt Diana says happens sometimes with kids my age. I promise to keep making good grades and practicing piano even though I don't always like it. And I promise to remember that families can look different and that's okay, because what matters is that we love each other. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The judge pronounced them husband and wife, and as James and Catherine kissed, Emma cheered loudly, jumping up and down with excitement. The reception was held at a restaurant overlooking the Hudson River, with toasts from friends and family, dancing, and a slideshow of photos chronicling their journey from boss and employee to partners in life and love. The highlight came when Emma approached the microphone to give her own toast, insisting that she had something important to say. I used to think it was sad that I had two mommies who weren't here, Emma said, her young voice clear and confident. My first mommy who picked me and then died, and Catherine who had to give me away. But my teacher Ms. Rodriguez told me that some people are so special, they need extra angels watching over them. I think I must be pretty special because I have my first mommy watching from heaven, and Catherine who came back to me, and Uncle James who chose to be my daddy even though he didn't have to. So I'm not sad anymore. I'm just really, really lucky. 5 years after the wedding, Emma graduated from middle school with honors, already planning her future at Columbia University, her birth mother's alma mater. The Sinclair Family Foundation had grown into a national organization with offices in 30 states, and Catherine and James ran both it and Sinclair Technologies with a partnership that had become legendary in business circles. They had faced challenges, certainly. Catherine had required additional surgery to replace her artificial heart valve. Emma had gone through phases of anger and confusion about her complicated origins. The company had weathered economic downturns and fierce competition. But through it all, they had remained committed to each other and to the family they had built from unexpected connections and second chances. On a quiet Sunday evening, as they sat together in their living room while Emma video chatted with college friends about the upcoming school year, James pulled Catherine close on the couch. Do you ever think about that day I answered your question? About how different things might have been if I'd given the safe answer instead of the honest one. Catherine nestled against his shoulder, her fingers intertwined with his. I think about it sometimes. But I also think the universe had a plan for us all along. My heart condition forced everything into the open, created the urgency we needed to stop hiding behind professional boundaries. If I hadn't collapsed, I might have spent years working up the courage to tell you the truth about Emma. Everything happens for a reason, James mused. Not always a good reason, and not always in a way that makes sense at the time. But looking back, I can see how every piece fit together. Your decision to give Emma up, my sister's choice to adopt, their accident that made me Emma's guardian, your search that led you to hire me, even the question you asked that changed everything. Is your bed big enough for two? Catherine quoted with a smile. It's perfect, James replied, kissing her temple. Because you're the one beside me. Emma looked up from her video chat, catching them cuddling on the couch. Ugh, you two are so mushy. But also kind of cute. Don't tell anyone I said that. They laughed together, the sound filling their home with warmth and love. Outside the windows, Manhattan sparkled with evening lights, full of other families with their own complicated stories, their own unexpected connections, their own journeys from heartbreak to healing. The never-ending story maker would have been proud. This was a tale of love and loss, of second chances and redemption, of a family built from broken pieces that became stronger in the mending. It was a story about a boss who asked an impossible question, a single father who gave an honest answer, and a little girl who brought them together in ways none of them could have predicted. And unlike fairy tales that end with happily ever after, this story continued every day, written in the small moments of connection, the big decisions made together, the laughter and tears and ordinary miracles of a life well lived.